Hello, I'm Stephen Hupp. I'm the editor of Skeptical Inquirer magazine. Since 1976, we've been dedicated to promoting science and reason. Check out our latest cover, The Disturbing Attacks on Science, with cover stories by Michael Mann and Peter Hotez, Dan Wilson, Katie Suleta, Bill Nye, and our very own Bertha Vasquez. It's really a spectacular and important issue. I recently became the executive director of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, CSI, a position that Barry Carr retired from this summer. For many reasons, I simply wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for Barry. He's a hero of mine and one of the most influential skeptics in the world. I wrote a tribute to him in the latest issue, titled Barry Carr Strengthened the Skeptical Community by Bringing People Together. Barry organized all of our conferences, including CSICon, or SciCon as we typically say. A team of us are now planning for the 2026 SciCon that will be held from June 11th to 14th in Buffalo, New York. We'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary. Save those dates, June 11th to 14th. In the next issue of Skeptical Inquirer, we'll be revealing almost the entire speaker list for the conference. And let me say, it's going to be astounding. Here's a hint. I've already said several of the names on the list during this opening tonight. Barry also created Skeptical Inquirer Presents, and he recently turned the reins over to me. Now, since Leanne Lord, our beloved host, couldn't be here tonight, I thought I'd just go ahead and jump in and host it myself. And so tonight we have Dr. Robert Greenspan. He's retired from a 47-year career in private practice, and he's always been interested in the history of medicine, which he teaches at the University of Maryland. I learned about Dr. Greenspan from this ginormous book, in which he shares many photos from his own collection of medical products, many of which are types of quack medicine. He has one of the largest collections of quack medicine in the world, and he'll be sharing some of it with us tonight. And so now I turn you over to Dr. Robert Greenspan.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate joining you.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here, and I just can't wait to hear your presentation. Thank you.
We will get going. I am not.
I see it. It looks like it's ready to go.
Well, it didn't get started here.
Oh, okay. While you're loading it up, I'll share with the audience the very first piece of quack medicine I bought here. So maybe I'll talk about that again at the last part of the show. Is it able to play?
No. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, it's going.
All right, here we go. Sorry about that. Let me start out with a disclaimer. I'm not selling anything, so rest assured, and I'm not promoting or debunking any of the treatments or products you'll be seeing in the next hour. My goal is to give you the tools with which to make wiser and more informed decisions, not just medical, but all sorts of decisions. I don't know why this doesn't. All right, let me start out with some definitions. First, science. Science is beliefs based on unbiased, independent, fully tested, and reproducible data. Pseudoscience, beliefs based on untested and or partial data, such as astronomy and astrology. And medical quackery is the promotion for profit of scientifically untested medical therapy. Let me emphasize that pseudoscience it says untested or partial data. Some of it may be certainly true, and a lot of folks take those true beliefs and extend them to areas that uh, are not true or not tested. But medical quackery is only for promotion. To start out with the fathers of medicine, to give you a little bit of history, Hippocrates of Kos was the Greek physician, father of medicine. He made initial observations on diseases and treatments, and unfortunately, they were just observations and many times not scientifically proven to be true. In a Hippocratic oath, he also uh, outlined the duties and responsibilities of physicians. To the right is Claudius Galen, another Greek physician who was the physician to the gladiators. His anatomies were believed to be true for 1,000 years. Unfortunately, he dissected animals, not humans, and there were lots of mistakes which were held to be true for 1,000 years. Now, medicine starts to become a science. In this first landmark book, De Humani Corporis by Vesalius in 1543, on the left, what he did was to throw out all of Galen's anatomies and start fresh with his own observations. On the right is a front piece to that book, and you can see him standing to the left, doing the dissections himself to the left of the cadaver. Normally, the physician would sit in a chair above and point out to other physicians where to do the dissections. Here you see a skeleton pointing, signifying or symbolizing the death of anatomy as it was previously taught for the last 1,000 years. The next step in the history of medicine was De Motu Cordis by Sir William Harvey, who described the physiology of circulation, a major step in the history of medicine and the next major landmark. Sir William Osler was the greatest modern physician, and he recognized the importance of Harvey's discovery. Here, for the first time, is an experimental solution of physiological problems. Conclusions followed naturally from the results, laying the basis for all experimental medicine. Now, we've been talking about anatomy and physiology, but for this discussion, we want to talk more about therapy and pseudoscience. And so we have to get into clinical investigation. The definition of clinical investigation is the use of scientific method to evaluate the prevention and treatment of a disease or of a procedure. Now, the landmark first controlled clinical trial was in 1747. That's when James Lind gave lemons to 6 sailors with scurvy. Scurvy is a skin disease, a vitamin C deficiency, which was suffered by British sailors. So he only gave 6 and found that those 6 recovered, determining which was the first controlled clinical trial. Now you see that the double stars under a double-blind randomized controlled trial. I'll be referring to that for the rest of the talk. That's when the experimenter and the subjects did not know who was getting what treatment, so they were both blind regarding who was getting what. So it was the beginning of modern medicine. Interesting, that was within the last 100 years that medicine really started. Now, here's a problem we've always had. How do you know whether a therapy works? Therapeutic success. We've had it for years and we have it today. And this is the reason. Whenever you treat someone, a third get better no matter what you do. Another third have a placebo effect. They feel better. In other words, they trust the doctor, they trust the medicine, so they feel better. And the other third get worse or they die. And the response to that is, well, you didn't seek help soon enough, so it's your fault. You didn't follow instructions and you sinned, so it was the will of God. So doctors have always been protected. Now, I mentioned the uncertainty of untested observations, and these are without controlled series. We have inexact measurements. For example, how do you measure pain with smiley faces? How do you put that in statistics, and how do you really determine the degree of pain with smiley faces? Number 2, you have conflicting data. Statisticians, 2 statisticians can come up with different data or can look at the same data and come with different conclusions. The term alternative facts is something we've just learned about in the last couple of years. Anecdotal evidence. My next door neighbor got better, so it must work. Not scientific. Coincidence versus cause and effect. For example, if you come to me with a runny nose and a cold, and I tell you to take a red flag, raise it above your head and jump them down 3 times, and you'll feel better in the morning. And you do. Well, you had a cold and you would have felt better anyway. Benjamin Franklin was quite well aware of spontaneous improvement when he said, God heals and the doctor takes the fee. Mark Twain was quite aware of the placebo effect. No one doubts that the mind exercises a powerful influence over the body. Physicians know that where the disease is only a fancy, the patient's confidence in the doctor will make the red pill effective. Anecdotal evidence. Well, grandma smoked 3 packs a day and she lived to be 100. So there must be nothing wrong with smoking. Here's very convincing testimonials. I guarantee in the next 3 or 4 days, you're going to see 10 or 12 testimonials, and people believe these things. This is a Theranoid belt. You see on the right upper side, the belt with a woman wearing it. And this lady 100 years ago wore it, and her husband gained 20 pounds. Her blood pressure was well controlled, and it cured a gallbladder. Your question, why do people believe in these crazy things? Well, Oliver Wendell Holmes tells us why. Now, Oliver Wendell Holmes was a professor of medicine at Harvard. His son was the famous Chief Justice of the United States by the same name. There is nothing men will not do to recover their health. They have been submitted to be seared with hot irons like galley slaves, to be crimped with knives like codfish, to have needles thrust into their flesh, to swallow all sorts of abominations, and to pay for all of this as if to be singed and scalded were a costly privilege, as if blisters were a blessing and leeches a luxury. Now, I mentioned Hippocrates before, and the first way of determining a treatment is to find the cause. And Hippocrates said there were 4 humors in the body, and every disease was caused by an imbalance of those humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And as I mentioned, there's a little bit of truth in everything. In the springtime, when the blood is high, people are sanguine or passionate. That's where we get the term ensanguinate. In the winter, the phlegm is high, and people become phlegmatic or unemotional. And that's when phlegm is high, people get colds and are coughing phlegm. In the summer, yellow bile is high. People become choleric or energetic. Now, the treatment was always cucumber seeds, and that's where we get the expression to be cool as a cucumber. Black bile is high in the autumn. Melania coli is another term, means black bile, and that's where we get the term melancholy. So when all of your humors are balanced, we say you're in good humor. That's where that term comes from. Now, bleeding has always been a form of therapy, as you can see from the left. And there is some truth, and it does work, except a lot of people don't understand the physiology. It started back in the early days when monks noticed that women had an even temperament, and they wanted to have an even temperament. The barbers who came to shave them also were their surgeons. And they asked the barbers to bleed them monthly to even out their temperament. So that barber surgeons began to bleed. On the right, you see a physician bleeding a patient, and the fellow is holding a pole. Now, the tourniquet is wrapped around his left arm, and there is blood dripping from the tourniquet. The barber would take the tourniquet, wrap it around the pole, and hang it outside his shop. And that's why when you see a barber pole, it's red and white stripes. That's where the stripes came from. Now, here's a story that is the truth. I went to medical school at the University of Maryland. I did my internship and residency there, and then I was in the Air Force for 2 years. I proceeded to Ohio State to take 2 years training in nephrology. My first 2 months as a nephrology fellow, I was called to the emergency room to see a patient who had missed her dialysis. She was fluid overloaded and about to stop breathing. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the dialysis machines down soon enough. So I bled off 2 units of blood, and from being short of breath and hardly able to breathe, she immediately sat up and felt much better after I bled her. I subsequently was able to put her on dialysis and had the blood packed, and I gave her back her own blood on dialysis. The folks at Ohio State asked me, where did you learn that? And with a little bit of a smile, I said, at Maryland, we always bleed patients. Don't you do here at Ohio State? But it does work in some circumstances when pressure is high. But unfortunately, people never knew the physiology. Cupping is another way of bringing those evil humors to the surface. You heat a cup, and as it cools, it draws out different humors. This is hundreds of years ago, but on the right, you see Ben Shelton, who is a left-handed American tennis player. He is now ranked #6 in the world. This wasn't taken hundreds of years ago. This picture was taken a few months ago when he cupped himself to help his tennis. I'm not sure that worked, but he believes it. Dietary therapy has always been used in treating diseases. And again, there's a little bit of truth in everything. They're called signatures. For example, if you cut a carrot in half, it looks like the human eye with a pupil and an iris. So carrots were used for eye disease. And in fact, carrots are a good source of vitamin A. Avocados have been given to pregnant women because they appear like the uterus and take 9 months to ripen. And in fact, avocados are high in folate, which prevents neural tube defects. Tomatoes have been used for hundreds of years for heart disease. And in fact, a tomato is red. It has 4 chambers and is very high in lycopene, which lowers LDL and improves endothelial function. Now, as far as brain problems and memory, what would be the food that has been given for hundreds of years to improve brain function? Obviously, walnuts. They look like the brain. And in fact, the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2014 found that walnuts improve memory deficits and learning skills in transgenic mouse models of Alzheimer's disease by inhibiting amyloid beta fibrillation, which suggested that walnuts may reduce the risk, delay the onset, and slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Again, science and pseudoscience gets very murky, and I've explained in the past few slides why that's the case. On the left is an ad from the 50s from the American Meat Institute suggesting that you eat pork. It was accepted by the American Medical Association. Look on the lower right. And the reason is that pork and liver sausage is high in vitamins, minerals, all the good things. And then a few years later, the medical community came out and said, that's terrible. You can't eat all this cholesterol. It's going to cause heart disease. And then a few years later, the medical community says, wait a minute, there's a ketogenic diet, which is a high fat diet, which is actually good for you. It lowers your glucose, increases the good HDL cholesterol, it reduces the bad LDL cholesterol, ketogenic diet. And you actually lose weight with that. In addition, monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats are also good for you. So you should be eating those fats. They raise the HDL and lower the LDL. So at this point, let's just go to, I kind of give it up. If I were the public, I would just give up. Let's try some common sense. What does common sense tell us? This is a nutrition tip. Butter is slippery. That's why we eat as much as possible to lubricate our arteries and veins. makes a lot of sense. And pseudoscience is makes sense, but doesn't always is not always follow it with controlled studies. This is the lemonade that I found in my refrigerator. My brother-in-law went out for a jog to be healthy, and he bought this lemonade. What could be healthier? It's all natural, it's organic, it's vegan, it's got filtered water, it's got organic sugar, organic lemon, no fat. What could be healthier? But in fact, it's terribly unhealthy. It's sugar water. Sugar stimulates the liver to raise the LDL, the bad cholesterol, and lower the HDL. So it's not healthy. Now, in the past, you could go find on the shelf lots of medications to cure almost any disease, to cure cancer, uh, to cure arthritis. So here's an example. We're talking about diabetes. So here's an example in the middle is a diabetes remedy from 100 years ago. Just drink that and you can cure diabetes. Now, I, I roamed around the internet and found these 8 books that are for sale right now. The Diabetes Cure, Curing Diabetes, a little suspicious. Things must have changed since I retired 7 or 8 years ago. I always thought that the cure of diabetes was a pancreas transplant, but a little suspicious to me. Phrenology is a classic pseudoscience. That's the determination of your intelligence and your behavior from your appearance. It was initiated by Franz Gall, who was a German neuroscientist, uh, who determined that the shape of your head and your brains, your head measurements could determine your intelligence. And there's a doctor on the right determining this lady's measurements. Now, Paul Broca, who was a French surgeon, noticed that one of his patients had a left frontal brain injury and lost speech. So indeed, different parts of the brain do control different activities. So it makes sense that if those areas grow faster than other areas, your appearance would change. And that's the basis of phrenology. So that this is a psychograph from the 20s where a doctor would measure a person's head and determine their intelligence and their best vocations. There were only 23 of these made, but this is one in action. The Phrenologic Journal came out. Look at the top. There's the white male, and then all the different characteristics based on appearance. And on the right, you can see if you looked like one of those animals, that was your behavior. And for the ladies, if you're interested in knowing what a genuine husband looks like and an unreliable husband looks like, you can refer to these illustrations. Victorian prohibitions to sex were very popular. Sexual transgressions, these were victims of self-abuse. Both the parents and the offspring were victims of self-abuse. So wherever there's a market, there are people to supply that market. So there are ways to allay those nocturnal emissions. And that's a spermatorrhea ring on the right with a book explaining all the bad things that happen from sexual abuse and nocturnal emissions. Mental defects, early death, et cetera, et cetera. Slip that on at night, then you don't have to worry. Water has always been therapeutic, used as a therapy, hydrotherapy. On the left is a splenic douche for abdominal problems. On the right is a cardiac douche for cardiac problems. Now these pictures were taken from the Battle Creek Sanitarium. John and Keith Kellogg set up a large sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, where they did hydrotherapy, electric therapy, massage therapy, diet therapy, you name it. Now, they made these dried flakes in the morning, and Keith wanted to market them, but John didn't. So Keith separated from the sanitarium and started the Kellogg Company. So that's where the Kellogg Cornflake Company came from. Now, we do know that water can be therapeutic in sitz baths, and we use that all the time in healing and pain. So, again, there's a little bit of truth in everything. Now, let me talk regarding water therapy. I have to tell you, as a nephrologist, I advise my patients only drink when you're thirsty. People really drink too much water. This business of drinking 8 glasses a day is bad advice. If it's going to be 100 degrees outside or you're running a marathon, obviously stay hydrated, but don't drink extra. Don't drink when you're not thirsty. You're going to get into trouble. Now, I did a consultation on a patient in the hospital who was in her fourth admission for congestive heart failure, fluid overloaded, and this was her lunch tray, filled with fluid. She should have been on a fluid restriction. I asked her, and I ask all my patients, do you drink a lot of fluids? And almost universally, I hear, I try to, because that's what they hear in advertising from bottled water companies. But again, just drink when you're thirsty. Now we'll get on to some of the devices that were used. The elements, carbon absorbs oxygen. So these little devices on the left were just, all they had was a little bit of carbon, and you would put it around your ankle and it would give oxygen, healing oxygen. And if you look at the green circle on the right, it says oxygen, home remedy without medicines, and it cures the incurable. Now you're thinking, well, what's the harm? What's the big deal? There is a big deal because it takes these patients away from life-saving treatment. For example, diphtheria. Here's a girl on the left who has a one of those devices on her ankle. Diphtheria, if you don't know, is the development. Diphtheria is a bacterium that creates a pseudomembrane and suffocates children. Now, this is the advertisement from the oxygenator regarding their device. This overwhelming child's disease finds its supreme master in the oxygenator. No earthly power except the oxygenator can take the slowly choking child with speed, simplicity, and safety, bring it back to health. Don't jeopardize the health and the life of your children by allowing to be injected into their veins and blood the often fearfully contaminated and death-dealing serum of an animal, otherwise known as an antitoxin. This is an actina, which has a little bit of carbon, which is soldered closed so you can't open it. One end will restore blindness, and the other end will cure deafness. There were no restrictions on advertising in those days regarding safety or the ability of them to perform their function. Lead in paint. This ad from the 50s is advertising importance. You can't beat the lead in making paint. And lead has been known as a toxin for hundreds of years. Now, what happens is in paint, it's made into lead acetate, and the lead acetate is very sweet. So kids eat the paint chips and end up with neurologic disorders. The advertisement on the right for asbestos is surreal. This came out in 1989, a little bit more than 10 years before 9/11. And if you can read between the green bars, asbestos contains fire, cannot burn, and holds up after the metal and glass have melted down, giving vital time for people to escape. When life depends on it, use asbestos. Very scary. When the fire alarm at the top went off, it took 2 hours to evacuate New York's World Trade Center. Again, this was 11 years before 9/11. No, I'm stuck again here. Sorry. Okay. Now we're back online. Here's the snake oil is the uh, poster child for quackery, but it makes sense, and that's what common sense is. A snake is very supple. So if you have a stiff joint or a stiff muscle, it makes sense to rub snake oil on it. Obviously, it doesn't work, but it makes sense, and that's what pseudoscience is. If you have a weak arm, it makes sense to exercise your arm to get it stronger. If you have weak eyesight, it makes sense to exercise your eye muscles to make your eyesight stronger. So these are eyeball massagers to make your eyesight better. Vibrating chairs and vibrating belts you've seen in the past supposedly cured internal disease and increased blood flow through vibration and for weight loss. Well, you thought that was 100 years ago. This is today. This is the WBV for sale right now, whole body vibration. And it's advertised to improve your immune system, increase blood flow, and decrease cellulite, and as a detox. Now, again, I'm awaiting the double-blind controlled studies, but they're for sale. Light therapy, we do know has been helpful, certainly in neonatal jaundice and in activating vitamin D. But here it's used for all sorts of other reasons. Now, if you thought that was 100 years ago, this is today. BLT, bright light therapy, advertised for SAD or seasonal affective disorder by interrupting the circadian rhythm 30 minutes in the morning. So you can buy this on the market right now. Color therapy. Gadali on the right made these machines with different colors. If you took off all your clothes and pointed toward the north and put on different colors, you could cure any disease. Now, again, there's a little bit of truth to everything, right? We know that ultraviolet may be helpful in treating psoriasis and eczema. Blue lights have been used in treating acne and some forms of cancer, perhaps. And red light is now advertised widely to improve hair growth by dilating vessels and improving circulation. Now, there are studies that show it may help, but there are also studies that show this may be temporary. So at the left is the Murky head device. It just has a light bulb in there for growing hair. And on the right is today's device. It's called photobiomodulation, PBM, light therapy. That's for sale today. Magnetism has intrigued people for many, many years. And certainly we're familiar with the MRI machine, which we use today. Now, the thought is that there's iron in red cells. So if you use these magnetic brushes, it would bring the red cells to diseased areas by magnetism, and it would improve healing. Now, if you look at that green circle, on the left advertisement, it tells you it cures heart disease, kidney disease, paralysis, seizures, almost anything just by using this magnetic brush. And if you thought that was 100 years, this is today. TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, is available today, purportedly to treat sleep disturbances and depression. Now, again, I don't know where the studies are, but that's available today. Electricity has always intrigued folks. Was first discovered in the 18th century by Alessandro Volta when he discovered that you could produce electricity chemically. So he made a battery by having zinc and silver discs divided by salted cardboard, and he created electricity. About the same time, Luigi Galvani used that device to stimulate frogs' legs, and the legs seemed to come to life. They twitched. So there was some animal electricity involved in human beings. His nephew, Giovanni Aldini, carried that one step further when he got executed corpses, and he was able to stimulate those muscles to move. And in fact, he opened the eye of one of the corpses and thought he was bringing it back to life. Mary Shelley was in Italy at the same time, and she read Aldini's book. And during a competition with some friends, wrote Frankenstein based on Aldini's discovery of bringing back life with electricity. Alicia Perkins was a New England physician who took that one step further by making Perkins tractors, which was made of different metals, which he thought would draw out disease. This is the first patented quack device in the United States. At the end of the 18th century, in fact, George Washington had a pair of Perkins tractors. This is a classic Gilray etching of Perkins tractors being used to remove disease. Now, Boyd's batteries were popular in the 20s, and they were made of copper and zinc, and you would put that on, and your perspiration, the salt in your perspiration would create electricity. Now, below that is an advertisement would tell you all the diseases that Boyd's batteries would cure. Now I highlighted the ones in yellow that are particularly disturbing: tuberculosis, kidney disease, diabetes, diphtheria, heart disease, paralysis, all by just wearing that simple battery. Now the next step was to put those metals in an electric corset that women could wear for treatment. There's an advertisement on the left. Dr. Manel, in his advertising, makes a very convincing argument. We can make high frequency currents increase metabolism, LA sensibility, stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, increase or diminish the functions of the glands, tone up muscular fiber, and act as a general tonic. These currents produce a general vitalizing and invigorating effect. I may go out and buy one myself. Sounds pretty good. Now, the early electricity was generated by electrostatic generators, like the one on the left. And this lady is receiving a heart treatment. There were glass plates which rotated and created a static charge. And all the placebo effects you would like to see are there: sparks and sounds and feelings of shocks to treat. Obviously not effective. You can see all the accessories on the left. Direct current was the next step in wet cell, dry cell batteries. This is a device that was used to treat mental disorders using batteries, direct current. And then a few years later, indirect current became available, alternating current. This device was used. I would not recommend trying this. I take no responsibility if anybody tries to use this thing. This is a Hogan machine with a large Tesla coil at the top. And this lady is receiving a treatment on the left for her arthritis. On the right is the machine. And again, you'll see sparks and ozone and whatever you need for a good placebo effect. Now, sexually transmitted diseases were very difficult to treat. Gonorrhea could not be treated, but where there's a market, there's always an answer, and they jumped in with electricity. This is a device for males to treat gonorrhea and STDs. Not to leave out the women, this is a violet ray tube filled with argon that could be inserted for ladies to treat their gonorrhea to be inserted. There's the machine on the left, and here it's being used. These are all the attachments for hair growth, for breast enlargement, penile, eye disease, inhaling. It came with all kinds of violet ray attachments. This is Albert Abrams. He was the king of the quacks, where he started radionics, where he believed that electromagnetic radiation was emanated from all diseases. And with his machines, he could not only diagnose that radiation, but he could cure it either with the patient or from far away. The government seized one of his devices and gave it to a Nobel laureate who examined it, and he said, it's the kind of a thing a 10-year-old would build to fool an 8-year-old. Now, this is the original Pathoclast, which is one of those radionic devices. Now, this is the professional model. I happen to have the manual for that model. And your question has been during this talk, are these doctors, did they really think they were healing, or are they quacks just trying to make a profit? That's always the question. So I'm reading from the professional manual, and I highlighted it in yellow at the bottom to answer your question. If you prefer to have your patient get some sensation during a surging treatment, just turn on a small amount of current by adjusting the pulsoidal control switch. This has a good psychological effect on some patients who must feel something to be convinced that they are receiving a treatment. Now, if you thought that was 100 years ago, this is today. This is a chi generator on sale today, a radionics device, and it uses all the words we like to hear. A double-blind experiments I've highlighted in yellow. Transfer life energy, skin rubbings on clothing and on other personal items. Can the genetic code of the target person, which is unique, and it will cure. It'll improve your intelligence, your fitness, and your energy, as well as weight control. But these are for sale today. Radioactivity became popular in the early part of the 20th century without anyone knowing what the dangers were. This is the American New Haim Heidi radioactive mineral springs, where they had hydrotherapy, electrotherapy, mechanotherapy, where you could bathe in radioactive springs and cure almost any disease. It's a health resort. Or you could, if you couldn't attend, you could get pure radium water to drink, which would cure eczema, stomach disorders, or you could just breathe it in. And if you thought that was 100 years ago, oh, these were also for sale, radioactive condoms and radioactive lipstick. Not for sale anymore, but that was in the 1920s. These were marketed. Now, today, in Montana, you can go to the Mary Widow radon mine, highly radioactive mines. This is today, where you can be rejuvenated in the upper left, feel young again. There are testimonials, as I mentioned, in the lower left. On the right, these crutches are no longer necessary for use since coming in the mine. Now, if you thought breathing in radon was good for you, how about smoking? The tobacco companies have always marketed their products in interesting ways. 2,600 physicians say Luckies are less irritating. Now, in fact, that's I underlined in green on the right, that's a protection for you. And they're trying to show how cigarettes are actually good for you and protective. On the left is Vaughn Monroe. He's a famous singer years ago, and he tries to make common sense. He smokes Camels, it agrees with his throat. And on the left, it says, noted throat specialists report not one single case of throat irritation from throat specialists. And to the right of that, famous athletes promote smoking. They don't get your wind. And at the top is James Bowson, who was a decathlon Olympic medalist, one of the finest athletes in the world, is promoting smoking. Tennis players, golfing, baseball players, they don't get your wind. Arthur Godfrey was a famous radio announcer who promoted Chesterfield's. 10 months of scientific evidence. If you, again, you look at the green circle, medical specialists, no adverse effects to the nose and throat from smoking. Unfortunately, Arthur Godfrey lost half a lung to lung cancer and died with emphysema and chronic lung disease. On the right is an advertisement trying to attract the ladies to smoking with nicotine cigarettes or nicotine cigarettes. I doubt an advertisement like that would be acceptable. So there's a market for people who are trying to stop smoking. So Coca-Cola came out with something to help you stop smoking. It was cocaine. And if you look at the between the green brackets, the chewing the Coca-Cola cocaine relieves depression, takes the place of the weed here as tobacco without causing a drug habit. It is a scientific remedy endorsed by the medical profession. On the right, the Kent Cigarette Company said, wait a minute, maybe there's a problem, so let's put filters on cigarettes. So they started filtering cigarettes, the micronite filter. And if you read the ad up there, it says the American Medical Association conducted independent tests to check all filters, and the most effective was the Kent filter. Unfortunately, they didn't report that the micronite filter was made of asbestos. A little bit of a problem that they found out later. Now, William Osler, the philosophies of one age have become the absurdities of the next, and the foolishness of yesterday has become the wisdom of tomorrow. That's kind of a summary of the talk. Now, the question is, what should we do? Now, my advice to experts, vendors, and healthcare providers, what should you do? And my advice is make independent double-blind controlled studies available to your audience, to your customers, and to your patients. Be consistent and communicate clearly. Very important, communicate clearly. Mark Twain recognized that doctors do not communicate with their patients and patients don't understand. So this is what a patient hears from one of his doctors. And Steve is going to read this.
All right. Without going too much into detail, madam, for you would probably not understand it anyway, great care is going to be necessary here. Otherwise, exudation of the esophagus is nearly sure to ensue. This will be followed by ossification and extradition of the maxillaries superioris, which must decompose the granular surfaces of the great infusorial ganglionic system, ending unavoidably in the dispersion and combustion of the marsupial fluxes and the consequent embrocation of the bicuspid populo-redax referendum rotulorum.
Thank you, Steve. I'm sure you understood that.
Every word.
Now, the great communicator had some thoughts. Don't talk to the general audience as you would your colleagues. Scientific terms do no more than mystify an audience of non-specialists. Good advice. Now my advice to consumers and patients. That was to doctors and vendors. This is to consumers and patients. Request double-blind randomized controlled studies in addition to your neighbor's advice. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Demand proof. Be scientists. That's what scientists do. Thank you, and I'll invite your questions.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Greenspan. I loved it. You know, I'm really interested in the history of quack medicine, and you're just the guy to talk to. You know, my wife's watching tonight, and so I thought maybe I could do my profile and you could assess if I'm a genuine husband or not based on my profile. Do you thumbs up or down on genuine husband based on that?
He wants to know, thumbs up or down?
Thumbs up.
Okay, good. Thumbs up. You heard that, Farah. Genuine husband. One thing you mentioned that you're a nephrologist.
Yes.
Could you explain what that is?
Oh, I deal in people with acute and chronic kidney disease and dialysis.
Okay, great.
I'm an internist who deals with renal failure, hypertension, uh, and end-stage renal disease.
Okay, wonderful. And I have a couple questions of my own, and then I'll turn it over to some questions from our audience for the next 10 minutes or so that we still have left. So put your questions in the Q&A section, everybody, and I'll start selecting from them. Your book that I really enjoyed here on the history of medicine is just a combination of a lot of what we saw today is actual quack medical products, but also art that is depicting those products. And I was just kind of curious, like, what did you get more interested in first? Was it the art, or was it the history of medicine, or did they just evolve together?
Well, I've always been interested in history. Regarding quackery, I'm amazed at the expertise and talent of the folks who make these devices. Things I don't even understand, but they make complex devices that don't do anything. And I love history because it doesn't really change. The only people who can change history are politicians.
No, okay, good. And before I ask the next question, I should remind or ask you, can you hit the stop sharing so that everybody can see our faces bigger? I'm sure they'd love to see us. Oh, very good. Um, how much of what we saw in your presentation tonight is like from your collection specifically? Like all of it, half of it?
All of it's in my collection, and as you can see, I've had trouble. I always have people demonstrating those devices when they come to visit, but some refuse to demonstrate. But they're all in my collection, plus a lot more. I've got a huge collection.
Yeah, some of those things I wish I didn't see or have to think about. I struggled with some of what I saw, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Um, what was the very first piece you collected?
The first piece was an anesthetic device. I started collecting over 50 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and it was a little anesthetic. But my medical collection is extensive, not just in quackery, but medicine, pharmacy, across the board.
Okay, great. So I'll take some questions here. The first one that came in tonight was about double-blind tests and randomized controlled trials. Are there moral issues with doing randomized controlled trials? Should we be concerned about moral issues?
Well, it's hard to answer, but sometimes the only way to get an answer is to do blind studies. If there's any bias, then you can't. It's going to change the outcome. So you certainly have to let those being given the medications know what they're getting and make choices.
Until you're in.
And you said earlier you talked about how drinking too much water can get you into trouble. What would be some symptoms that someone might have if they are starting to have trouble from drinking too much water?
Well, heart failure is a very common problem and a cause of many admissions to hospitals. And I think the first thing is to check. Let me first say, check with your doctor. That's always the first thing. Check with your doctor, but don't force fluids, but just make sure you're hydrated. But those folks who are going into heart failure and in the hospital many times, be careful, check with your doctor, and don't drink too much.
Okay, and this is a question I had, but somebody's asking it in this form. What is the most intriguing or interesting pseudoscientific device or therapy you have come across?
Uh, I think that Hogan machine, the machines that you saw, are very interesting, where they shoot sparks to the ceiling and create ozone and smells and really make you think that things are happening, but they aren't. And you get but as I said, you do get a placebo effect. Some people feel better and walk out having been treated.
And what can you say about William Reich's radionics?
Get double blind studies. That's all I can say is as I said, check with your doctor, but be a scientist and check things out. Don't ask your next door neighbor what he or she thinks and go by that advice. Check it out.
Did doctors who were active in promoting quackery ever get punished for sharing unproven remedies? I'm sure that's happened at some point in history, but when I guess, do you have a sense of when that started to happen?
Oh, yes. In the 20s and 30s, uh, there was a teething device for kids that contained opium, and kids started dying. So the FDA got involved and started regulating. After the 30s, there were regulations for efficacy and safety. But that happened later on, and many people died. And a lot of these guys never really were tried because they had patients testifying how good they feel, how good they felt from the placebo effect. So there's always somebody who improved.
Do you have any thoughts on Lyme disease or what some people might call chronic Lyme disease?
Do I have any thoughts on Lyme disease? No, it's it's a dangerous, very bad disease, and you need to be treated right away. It's hard to pick up. A lot of neurologic problems, but seek treatment.
Okay. And let's see what else. He keeps sending in the questions. They're rolling in here. Someone says, "Thank you for this fantastic journey through history." Okay, what is the oldest medical quackery that persists to this day?
Well, I showed you the stuff that's still being used needs to be tested. That radon mine is people are breathing in radon, and we need to make sure that's safe. So there's stuff out there. I showed you all the stuff that needs double-blind controlled studies. They need and magnetic therapy. Uh, there are studies that show it works, and there are studies that show it doesn't work. So you need the double-blind controlled studies. That's the gold standard.
So somebody's asking how do you acquire everything in your collection? I mean, you've got small things, you've got huge things. How did you end up with all of this?
I get it through their auctions, through the internet, and they're a network of friends that I have, and we work together. We help each other find things on the internet, and we travel around. I don't really travel that much, but when I started, no one was collecting, so it was very easy because there was no market. Nobody was collecting medical things when I started 50 years ago, and now there are lots of people collecting.
Yeah, as someone who likes to collect little medicine bottles from antique shops, I ask everybody else not to do it because we got to try to keep those prices low for me. Um, Somebody asks, is homeopathy quackery?
Well, it's not popular. The interesting thing about homeopathy is they said if you take a small bit of medication that is similar, produces similar symptoms to the disease, it cures it. That's what homeopathy is. Small amounts of a substance that's similar to disease cures it. The problem is they went out of business because they couldn't make any money. There was there wasn't a market for small amounts. The pharmacists need to sell lots of stuff.
But there are still pharmacies selling homeopathy, so some of them have managed to survive, it seems like.
Yes.
Okay. Any thoughts about the vitamin and supplement industry?
There's a place for some vitamins, but not all vitamins. And some vitamins are actually not good for you. They can damage your liver if you take too much. There's so many vitamins in the American diet in just what you eat. Uh, there doesn't seem to be much. Certainly, vitamin D in elderly people with calcium problems is important. But I think people are likely taking too many vitamins because you get it in your diet so much.
Okay, great. And I'm sure some people do need to take vitamins for some specific reasons, but
Absolutely, you do need to take some.
yeah, okay,
But check with
great.
your doctor.
All right. Well, we're at the end of the hour, and Dr. Greenspan, you and I've been communicating for a few months now, and one of my goals in life on my bucket list is to come visit you and see your collection. So hopefully, we'll figure out a way to make
I'm
that
looking
happen.
forward to trying some of these things out on you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing it with us tonight. I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say it was quite a joy to see it all. Sometimes quite frightening, but sometimes we need to be frightened. And thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And remember to subscribe to Skeptical Inquirer magazine. We'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary next year. And save the dates for the SciCon in Buffalo, June 11th to 14th. We have an amazing lineup of speakers, which we will reveal in the next issue of Skeptical Inquirer.